What happens if a disaster strikes in your locality and your police department and fire department are not available or able to provide assistance to you? Stay tuned to learn how the City of Cupertino has trained community volunteers to step in and assist in that situation as part of CERT, which is sponsored by the Federal Emergency Management Administration.
Welcome to The Better Part, a program by and for seniors and devoted to exploring the many facets of those better years of our lives. The name of our program was inspired by a quotation from Robert Browning. "Grow old along with me, the best is yet to be, the last of life for which the first was made." Now, sit back and enjoy a program made especially to provide seniors with useful information, plus some lighter moments to brighten your day.
Our guest today is Marcia Hovey, the Emergency Coordinator for the City of Cupertino. Welcome to The Better Part, Marcia.
Thank you. Great to be here.
You've been here before several times, I think last time with disaster skills, if I'm not mistaken. So this is all part of that same picture. We mentioned in the opening the term CERT, the acronym CERT. Can you tell our audience what CERT stands for?
Sure. CERT stands for the Community Emergency Response Team. And that program was started in the early 90s by the Los Angeles City Fire Department. What happened was there was an earthquake in Mexico City in the early 80s. I think it was 1984. And there were a lot of citizen or community volunteers that stepped up immediately after the earthquake because they were there. They were on the scene when it happened. And so the City of Los Angeles Fire Department went down to study what these volunteers did and what the benefit was. It turned out that they saved the private community that was there when the earthquake happened, went into buildings and saved 800 people.
That's impressive.
The bad part was that 100 of those same volunteers were killed in the process.
Because?
Because they didn't know what was safe and what was not safe. And so the purpose of the Community Emergency Response Team training was to still allow people to be able to help, but with the knowledge of what's safe and what's not.
So we recognize then that individual in any community in an emergency wants to do something, and I guess the name of the game in Cupertino in your department is to figure out how to bring them on board and do it safely.
Yes, and I can tell you, any city, the success of their disaster response is entirely dependent on what the community does.
That's wonderful. And how long have we in Cupertino been involved with CERT?
We started right at the beginning. As soon as it was rolled out, FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, went ahead and reviewed it, thought that it was a best practice that should be shared across the country. And so in 1990, it actually started being trained in cities, and we started training it right then.
That's wonderful. Well, now, when you advertise or make it known that you have a place where people can come to learn about CERT, how do they receive their training? Who are your instructors? How long does it take? Is there cost involved?
Well, originally the training was just by firefighters, but the reality is that the training is basic safety training, and once some of our volunteers took the training, they just became experts, even more expert than the fire department, because they were working at this very basic level in their neighborhoods. So our instructors now are all volunteers, and so that's a savings cost to the city, which again is volunteers making the city better. And the training that they receive, the training that we give to the public, which is free, and it's pretty time intensive, so it's probably $150 value per student that we offer for free, because we want the city to be successful, and so we need people to know what to do. And so they're going to learn a variety of skills, and it's basic information about the skills. So they'll learn about building damage, so that they can tell if it's safe to even enter their own home, or if that's putting them at risk. We talk to them about how to communicate with the city to provide information on the status of their neighborhood, because the city needs that information right away in order to prioritize what needs to be done. We teach them how to communicate on little family radio service radios, so that they can talk to their neighborhoods, they can talk to their teams. And so we just give them some basic radio protocol. It's real simple.
Now, does the city provide those radios, or do the people buy them themselves?
It's a combination. It's a team. So we have locations around the city where these are stored, so that the teams can mobilize there.
Wonderful.
But in neighborhoods, they use them as well.
Okay.
And then we also use the higher level of professional communication, which is ham radio.
Okay, that's
And
CARES.
that's our Cupertino Amateur Radio Emergency Service.
Excellent.
And they're actually our citywide emergency communication network. And then in the neighborhoods, we use these little family radio service radios. They also, the people that take the training get some basic first aid, so that they can know what to do immediately after a medical emergency arises. We talk a little bit about disaster psychology and the personal impacts of going through a disaster, and how to stay healthy. So it's a variety of subjects. We touch on animal care, because we know that there can be a lot of stray and injured animals. We talk about sheltering people, and about running field organization on how to manage a disaster in a neighborhood level. And so when they finish the training, it's not that they have to be able to do all those things, it's that they have an awareness of what is safe and what's not safe to do.
Right, and then amongst their neighbors who haven't taken the training, they can pass this information
Right,
on.
and it is that easy. You can share it with your friends and neighbors.
Now, where does the training take place, for example?
Generally, we hold the training at City Hall. It runs over a 5-week period. There are 5 3-hour classes, and typically we offer a morning session and an evening session
Wonderful.
on the same day, so if people's schedules change, they can come to a different class and make up. And then after the 15 hours of classroom, which has a lot of hands-on practical training in it, we do a 4-hour disaster simulation.
Oh, really?
Which is really fun. And we set up the teams, and we do exactly what we've trained them to do.
Why do you call a disaster simulation fun? In what sense is it fun?
Well, you know, the most rewarding part for me is watching people who, when they came into the class, didn't know what to do, to be fully empowered, that they know how to respond.
Yes.
And they are working as a team, they've made friends, they've bonded together, and it just builds a stronger community.
Now, this is an interesting thing, because Cupertino has a very large number of people who have immigrated from other countries, and consequently different cultures, different languages. Can you talk about that a bit?
Well, it's actually very beneficial to us, because we have such a diverse expertise coming into Cupertino. They've been through disasters, a variety of disasters, and different countries plan and prepare differently, and so we take the best of the knowledge that they bring to us and incorporate it into our programs. But also it allows us the ability to have people that speak different languages.
That's important. Really
important in a disaster, to be able to communicate with everyone. And sometimes the people that are even foreign, maybe they came from New York. They've never been through an earthquake, and so they are much more committed to learning how to prepare for an earthquake than people that have lived here their whole lives.
Yes.
Because we've just forgotten that it can be a lot worse than we've experienced.
Yes, I had the old story about people visiting from the back east, and they're guests at a house in the middle of the night. They hear these noises, and they wake up the host saying there are burglars in the house. Go back to sleep, it's just an earthquake.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
So you've told us about how they receive the training. There are sessions morning and afternoon. I even believe that you take them out to the fire departments, maybe it's this Santa Clara County Fire Department facility, where they get to put out a fire, an oil-based fire. That's an interesting experience. And the cost essentially is there's no charge.
There's no charge.
Free of charge.
We want people to take the class.
Now, once they take the class, and I presume there's graduation, and they get a certificate,
Yes.
and they get a card, some kind of identity card. What is that for?
Well, the photo ID designates that they've taken the class, which then if they were first on the scene, even at a car accident, because the skills that we're teaching aren't just for earthquakes, they're to keep you safe and for you to be able to provide help whenever you feel prompted to do it.
Good.
So this ID card gives the first responders, when they drive up, the ability to know that you've had some training, that you're part of the city's, you're affiliated with the city's response, and that you have certain training. So they may choose to ask you to stay and assist, or they may just take the information that you're providing and go on.
Wonderful. Now, in addition to the card, I understand that they have special jackets they wear and hard hats. Tell us about that.
Well, it's important. We want the community to know who's been trained and who hasn't. So when they graduate, we issue a hard hat that says CERT on it, so that well, and that's for two reasons. One is we don't want anybody to get hit in the head by falling debris, and when they're helping the city out, we want to make sure that they're properly protected. And then the vest, which is reflective, so it's going to keep them more safe at night, and also make them visible and a credible source of information. So the community, if they see someone wearing one of these vests that says CERT on it, they know that this person is connected to the city, will provide good information to them.
That's excellent. Marcia, after your community volunteers have taken the classes, do they have specific tasks that are assigned to them?
Yes, the CERT class itself is to give everyone an idea of what's involved in responding to a disaster, and then they get to pick their specialties. So if you have an interest in communications or in medicine or in animal care or child care or keeping track, there's a huge need to just keep track of paperwork in a disaster, so we can make sure that we've not left anyone out. We've checked every house. And so those specific tasks are what they continue to meet and work on. But each one of them has a different hourly commitment. So it really enables people to pick the amount of time they have, what their interests are. And then, in a neighborhood, after an earthquake, everyone walks outside. And it doesn't matter if you've taken community emergency response team training or not. You are the community emergency response team for your neighborhood. Everyone that walks outside and says, wow, did you feel that? And so they're going to then pool their skills and abilities and take care of themselves, because they know that's all that's all they can do, that there is no help. They probably can't even get through to 911 at that point early in a disaster. And so they're working on those skills. So the more the neighborhood talks ahead of time about what are our skills and abilities, what can we do, and then at least a few of them take the CERT training so that they can go back and share information about, well, we said we were going to do this, but I learned that that's not safe to do.
Good.
Here's a more safe way to do that, so that, because we don't want people to get hurt, but we definitely want them to help.
That makes a lot of sense. That's really great. The obvious one, where people walk out of their houses, the house is shaken due to an earthquake. Let's suppose we have another disaster. How are people notified about it? For example, a chemical spill on 280 Dianza Boulevard crossover.
Okay, well, in Santa Clara County now, there's a brand new system. It's called Alert SCC, Alert Santa Clara County. Cupertino had their own system, so people have received these phone calls, these automated phone calls in the past, but now this is a county-wide system, and it can be activated by any of the cities to report, especially if it's a disaster that's crossing boundaries, and it's not self-announcing. See, earthquakes announce themselves, so we don't have to tell you. But everything else, you need to be notified. So the automated phone system would send out a phone message. It can send out text messages and emails, and you have to sign up for the system.
So if I wanted to be alerted, I would call, maybe say your office, give you my phone number, that would go into a data bank, that in an emergency my phone would ring and said, oh, by the way, stay off 280, there's been a chemical spill.
Right. And
So-
we have on our website, cupertino.org,
Mhm.
under the emergency preparedness section, there is a link directly into the sign-in so that
Wonderful.
you can put every phone number that you want. And it's really beneficial too if you're away from home, maybe out of the state or out of the country, you're still going to get that notification to tell you something's happening back home.
The miracle of cell phones.
It's
If
great.
you carry the phone with you and you're in New York, you can learn about an earthquake in your hometown of
Right.
Cupertino. That's remarkable. I guess grew up in a different age. So we now know that you have these qualified community volunteers. They know what to do. They will step forward and spread the word in their neighborhood if we have a disaster, and the police and fire department can't come in immediately. Do you have classes? Do you have refresher classes? And how often do you have them?
Well, it depends on what the specialty is. So
Okay.
if it's something that's relatively dangerous for the participants, we want them to practice more often. So if you want to be on the search and rescue team and actually go looking for people in damaged buildings, then we want you to train more often. If your specialty is caring for the children of the responders, and you're a mom and you have kids, you may only need to come to a refresher once a year because you know what the procedures are and they're not going to change. You're going to take care of the kids while their parents are helping in the response. And so, yeah, it varies. And so you can, find whatever works for you. As far as the notification, though, I think I kind of stopped at how the public is notified, and the CERT teams are included in that. They would get that notification.
Certainly.
But of course, in an earthquake, the phones aren't going to work.
Right.
They're not reliable, and
Right.
so we do have other methods. For example, the CERT team knows, and the CERT team isn't just the community emergency response team members. It's every volunteer organization in our city that everyone is part of the disaster response. So we have ham radio operators, we have a medical reserve corps, we have block leaders, and we have community emergency response teams. So we have a lot of people that are currently involved in our umbrella of community emergency response.
Yes, we did a program with the Red Cross, and there's a gentleman who lives in Cupertino who is in charge for Santa Clara County of providing shelter
Yes.
in the case of...
And we work together.
Yes, I'm sure you do.
Yes.
And the interesting thing is that you bring people in to schools. Some schools have facilities for cooking and so on. So it's pretty well organized.
Right. But so then during an earthquake, because we know the phones aren't going to work, we have instructed all of the community emergency response team people that if the ground shakes hard enough to knock things off the shelves in your house, you are automatically activated, and you start to do the procedures that we've trained you to do to take care of your home and your family. Go outside and see what the damage looks like and report that to us.
Very good.
We also have a website where we would put up information that said volunteers were activated. Maybe it wasn't an earthquake, but there was a hazardous material spill, or you heard about it on the radio. You weren't sure that your help was needed, and we don't want volunteers to self-dispatch. We want them to, they have to be requested in order for us to make sure that our safety procedures stay in place.
Well, now, I know CARES meets in the basement of City Hall, and they set up a radio station, pretty much, and they have members who are out throughout the community. It's a wonderful system that they've got. During an emergency, do you report to City Hall? Are you in a single place in the city and kind of coordinating?
Well, the city, upstairs in the City Hall, what used to be the City Council chambers, is now the Emergency Operations Center. And all of the city staff, the department heads, and the people that have to make decisions are supposed to get there. We're supposed to get the center up and running within an hour of the disaster. Our ham radio operators are almost instantaneously up and running because they just turn on their radios at home and then they can all talk to each other. So we start to get information right away.
Right.
And fortunately, some of them live within walking distance of the city hall, so they can help with that setup. But some of the staff, including me, I live in Morgan Hill, I won't get there right away, so we all have to kind of be cross-trained.
Sure.
That's one of the key elements that we train volunteers on, how to set up that center and have it ready for the city staff when they get there from their homes, and also to provide additional staffing during the disaster in the Emergency Operations Center, because we don't have enough people. For the amount of information coming in all at once, we need more people helping us keep track.
Always, every organization needs more people. But now I know in Cupertino that we've had several disaster drills. Can you talk about the last one and how all of this worked?
This was really exciting because for 10 years we've been training CERT. Well, for 10 years I've been in this position and training CERT. And this has always been my vision, is that CERT would take over itself. It would start to run itself. And this team of volunteers put on a drill that I could have never done in my lifetime. And it was because of the variety of skills and abilities that they had, and that they were able to pull it off. So this drill, they ended up, the goal of the drill was to try to touch all 21,000 homes in Cupertino over a 16-hour period.
21,000 homes over 16 hours.
Over 16 hours, which is a long time if you're talking earthquake. And what we're trying to do is see how long it would take us to walk door to door, to check on people's status, to provide information to them.
Right.
So 21,000 in 16 hours, which right away, if you're doing the math, that means that you could be on your own for 2 days before you ever see a CERT person, unless we have a lot more CERT people.
Yes.
And so at the end of the drill, well, what they did, they planned since July. We had planning meetings. There were a key group, and normally when we have refresher trainings, we get 20, 30 people at a time because schedules are just so busy. For this drill, we started to have a weekly meeting that turned into a weekly potluck that turned into about 50 people coming and brainstorming about how do we touch 21,000 homes.
There you go.
And oh my goodness, first they said, we don't have enough people to do this, and they started recruiting volunteers. They got every scout troop in Cupertino. They woke up some of the CERT people that took it 10 years ago and haven't gotten involved since, and they did it. We had 600 volunteers. We went through the 16 hours and learned so much about what a real earthquake would look like. And the only downside, but it was a lesson learned, is that we actually touched about 7,700 homes. And that was even with the community walking up and saying, oh, I can help do this. And so they would walk door to door too.
You were shooting for 21,000 and you ended up actually contacting 7,700. Well, that's pretty good.
It's pretty good for the first time.
Good start.
We're going to do it every year. And we expect that the community will get more involved every year.
Wonderful.
The community groups can get involved. Churches can pick a specialty and do something. People that have a four-wheel drive might be valuable in our drills in the future if roads are blocked.
Oh, I see. They have more traction, get around more.
People that have pickup trucks might end up being ambulances, helping us transport injured people to the nearest medical facility.
That's kind of important, yes.
And so we have a video that we made of some of the things that were done. You can see the variety of skills that people put into play, the diversity of the people themselves. There are scouts, there are people that are professionals working in Silicon Valley. There are people that have been retired either a long time ago or just recently, men, women, and it was just great. They put in since July, and the drill was on October 17th and 18th, they put in almost 4,000 hours, including the day of the drill. 4,000 volunteer hours, which really, that would be like me trying to plan that drill by myself for a full 2 years.
Yes.
And they did it in 5 months, and that's what the community can do.
That's wonderful. I know, I remember seeing the big drill they had in San Francisco some time back, and of course San Francisco is a couple of 100,000 people. Here we are in Cupertino with, I think it's 55,000 community residents, and we're right up there with even the big cities in planning for these things. It looks like our time is running short, and we always are glad to have you in the studio telling us about what you're doing to improve the city of Cupertino's chances of coming through these situations reasonably well. So I'd like to thank you for being our guest today.
Thank you.
And keep up the good work, Marcia.
Thank you. I want the community to keep up the good work, because I'm nothing. They're going to make the difference.
Well, that's quite true. And then for the community, we will, at the end of the program, provide your website. They can go to that site and get more information. I like the idea of putting their telephone number in to get a telephone alert. And also there'll be a phone number in case they wanted to get more specific information.
And if I can just add one more thing, in order to volunteer, you don't have to take any training to become a volunteer. And filling out the piece of paper and getting a photo ID ahead of time, even if all you say, well, I'll be available if you let me know I can answer phones.
Wonderful.
That it's a piece of paper, but it's a piece of paper that's in place. It lets us know that we have more people in the community that we can count on, and so it makes our plans more robust. And in the middle of the disaster, it's really hard to try to fill out that kind of paperwork.
Right.
So I really would encourage people to just call and say, what can I do to help?
Wonderful. Great. And let's hope that they do call.
I hope they do.
We hope you have found today's program informative and interesting. If you have a guest or a topic you'd like the Better Part to produce, you can always reach us through the Cupertino Senior Center. The number there is 408-777-3150. You can also learn more about the Better Part at our website, www.thebetterpart.com. Many of our programs are available through the Santa Clara County Library System, and several programs are also available on YouTube. Thank you for watching. See you again next week.